Hey guys, what's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zach.
If you haven't joined us for one of these episodes before, what we do here is we are given a topic and we both pick top three lists in said topic, and then we have to pick final top three out of those other 6 entries, and then we have our final top 3. So, Zach, in this episode, what are we going over?
Well, Matt, you know what's so sad to see?
Us getting old?
That too. And actually kind of ties into this. But when you see a band go through a very public, ugly breakup.
I thought you were going to say when it's a band's coming of age and they love each other very much, things happen.
That's true.
Great music happens.
Or sometimes they cheat on their said musical partner with another musician, and it turns into a whole like Fleetwood Mac scenario. That actually works in more ways than one than I even imagined when I first said that.
Oof.
But anyway, you always hate to see when...
That's when your family tree is straight.
Especially when in today's age where everything can just happen on the internet so fast. Whether it's the full band just implodes and completely breaks up, or one particular member ends up getting pushed out of the band or leaves the band under less than nice terms, and it becomes a war of words. We thought it'd be fun to go over and name the 3 ugliest splits in music, whether it's full-blown band breakups or just kicking out a certain member and the breakup wasn't as clean as you would have liked it. So Matt, go ahead. I'm going to let you go first with your 3 picks.
All right. I think this is probably going to be the most obvious list that I've ever put together. If it's not, I mean, please somebody let me know if there was something more obvious that I missed.
Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Epic Footnote.
Where all fine podcasts are sold.
#plug.
Number 1 is got to be the most quintessential thing that you think of and that anybody thinks of when they think of band breakups. The split between Van Halen and David Lee Roth.
Why? What happened?
Oh, you don't know what happened?
Well, actually, so let's go. Actually, in all seriousness, which split are we talking about?
We're talking about the original first split.
The original first split.
The one where he left or got kicked out, depending on whose story you're listening to, and Sammy was brought in.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of band breakups, this is the band breakup that you think of because there was a clear dividing line. On this side, you're with the Van Halen brothers. Mm-hmm. On this side, you're with David Lee Roth. I mean, there are still people warring over who was to blame for this breakup. Who was in the right, who was in the wrong. You had to pick a side. You couldn't be on both. You couldn't see right down the middle. And depending on that, it was pretty much your outlook for Van Halen into the future. Because Sammy came in and on prior episodes we talked about, is there something that we were missing about Van Hagar? Was it really as bad as everybody thought about? Make sure you go listen to that podcast because that was a really good one.
Available on literally every single platform you can imagine.
Where all fine podcasts are sold. But then you had to take the side of, well, it wasn't the real Van Halen anymore. It wasn't that signature sound with David Lee Roth and the zoop zap zoopity bop.
Life goes on without me, which is ironic because that's what they did.
But there you go. That's number 1.
Number 1, ziggity doo dah.
Number 2, this is where it gets ugly.
Uglier than Van Halen?
Much.
Ooh.
To my knowledge, I don't know if any punches were thrown. But this is a breakup that involved people almost getting killed over. Literally. It's with the split between the brothers in Oasis.
Oh.
Yeah. So Liam and Noel Gallagher, brothers, just can't stand each other. Would get into fights on the regular in the band. Just whether it's a war of words or fist fighting, and then it all broke down. I forget what year, but I forget which brother it was too, but was trying to throw the other one over the railing in the balcony at the music awards. And yeah, if this isn't like literally a vicious breakup, I don't know what is. So that's number 2.
Okay.
Number 3, it's been kind of dulled down a little bit. After you've been drinking whiskey for a while, your senses kind of get dulled to it. You know things that are going on, but you just kind of, mellow and kind of chill, unless you're an angry drunk, and that's just a whole nother story. But this one's kind of been toned down since the recent reunion of Guns N' Roses. But the split between the whole band, Slash, Axl, and then just the fallout between all of those members, it was, in my opinion, it was too much fame, way too quick, fueled by alcohol and egos. This is what happens when everything just kind of disintegrates and falls apart. Everybody just kind of goes their own ways. And then over the years, what was it, like 20 years? I forget, between the original split and then when they got back together. Not for Chinese democracy, but for the Not in This Lifetime.
Honestly, it sounds about right. It's 20 years. It depends on when you consider Slash to have actually been kicked out, because there was even conflicting stories of that as to how he got kicked out of Guns N' Roses.
All right, let's call it 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Just let's put a stamp on it, a little asterisk on it. We'll call it 20 years.
20 plus years.
20 plus years. And in this, there was so much feuding and war of words over the years. Hey, is Slash ever going to get back with the band? Hey, are you guys ever going to get back together? And at one point, I remember Axl calling Slash a cancer.
Yeah.
And if that's not one of the biggest, most insulting things that you can call somebody, I don't know what is. But hey, I guess money talks, bullshit walks, because they're back together now. Slash and Axl are actually embracing on stage at some points. So I guess all is well. But like I said, it's been, this breakup has been dulled down over time just because they were able to get back together. But when the breakup initially happened, I mean, if you wanted to ever listen to a sound of a band failing, I beg of you to go listen on the Spaghetti Incident. Go listen to Sympathy for the Devil. I don't think I've ever heard a cover that was just thrown together because we needed a filler, and that's the filler.
That was for the soundtrack of Interview of a Vampire, too. That was literally and even they've said it, yeah, that's the sound of a band breaking up. Like, they recorded that just because they needed to offer a song for a movie soundtrack.
It was awful. And the fact that it got I don't know if it got released on that soundtrack, but the fact that got released at all, and let alone on 2 albums,
yeah,
that's incredible to me.
Yeah.
So those are my top 3: Oasis, Van Halen, and Guns N' Roses.
All right, my turn. Less obvious. I should also just preface this by saying, as easy as it would have been to choose Black Sabbath for the multiple breakups they've had, but I'm not including Black Sabbath. I'm including another band with the color of black in it, the Black Crowes. Now, you want to talk about? You mentioned about the Gallagher brothers and Oasis. Chris and Rich Robinson, they even, when they were on Howard Stern recently to promote their reunion, joked that even they scared, when they were on tour of Oasis, they scared the brothers of how much they fought. They were no strangers, being brothers who hated and fighted each other on tour, on stage, while recording and whatnot.
Would you say that it was twice as hard for them to stay together as other bands?
Oh, snap.
Boom! Got him.
Booyah! Anyway, but things really got nasty when the band broke up in 2013 over, I love it, business practices. It makes everyone sound so much more official when you blame business practices.
Yeah, business practices.
But so at the announcement with them announcing that they were breaking up, Rich released a statement saying, "I love my brother and respect his talent, but his present demand that I must give up my equal share of the band and that our drummer of 28 years and original partner, Steve Gorman, relinquish 100% of his share is not something I could agree to."
I wouldn't agree to that either.
No,
That's
exactly.
Pretty shitty.
So literally for almost 8 years, almost 10 years, the brothers didn't speak. The only way that they did talk to each other was by trading jabs at each other in interviews. Chris would go on to even do his own little tribute touring Band of the Black Crowes where they just
Magpie Salute.
No, that was Rich, his own actual original band. Literally, Chris did a band called As the Crows Fly, and guess what they sang? Black Crowes songs.
Tunes.
And they were just trading jabs until late 2019. It's a miracle. The brothers kiss and make up, and they reform the Black. It's a little weird that I say it out loud. They reform the Black Crowes. So all's well, right? Well, no, because that original partner that Rich was defending? Guess who's not part of the reunion tour? And he's been far from shy from letting out a ton of dirt about how this is nothing more than a money grab. Shocker. That
It's like I just
giving
said
more dirt into how Chris was so demanding of the extra money that he would get, as if the band couldn't do anything without him. It just literally, even as the band has reformed, the ugliness of their split has been made even more public. So Black Crow's definitely up there, where it's just ugliest splits that, in theory, even though they're quote back together, is still just unpleasant to follow.
Okay.
So that's number 1. Number 2, we're gonna go into a little bit of the prog metal sphere here. Queensrÿche. In 2012, they had a very public and very sad split from their singer, Jeff Tate, to the point that it all boiled up. So it was April 2012. They were about to hit the stage somewhere in South America, maybe even Brazil. And basically, that's when Jeff realized that his entire family, who had been working for the band in different forms, whether it was management, running fan club, had basically been fired. And now he claims that Scott Rockenfield made some comments right as they got on stage. Scott claims he made no such comments, but they literally had to be held apart from fighting each other. And throughout the whole final show, Jeff kept spitting on the drummer. And if that wasn't bad enough, that public of a split, it then turned into lawsuits where the band was going to continue on with new singer Todd Latour replacing him. And ironically, they were kind of already setting up for the fact that that was going to happen, because around that same time, the rest of the band was starting to perform as Rising West with Todd as a singer, where they perform really deep cuts of Queensrÿche, aka songs that Tate couldn't sing anymore because his voice couldn't get that high. Now, granted, no one's saying that Tate was an easy person to work with to begin with. His control and stubbornness is very well documented, and he definitely was leading a lot of the changes, so I think the band was very eager just to get rid of him. But basically, for the next few years, not only were there lawsuits over whether the band had the right to fire Tate, whether they could even continue to call themselves Queensrÿche, but then Tate was fighting for his right to be called Queensrÿche, to the point that for at least a year, there were 2 versions of Queensrÿche. One with the whole band and a new singer, and a, quote, all-star lineup of Tate's version. And there was even one version of Queensrÿche released their own album, and the other one released theirs as well at the same time. Literally fighting for the name and the right to have the name. Until finally, after numerous legal battles, a court favored in the band's side, and Tate could no longer call himself Queensrÿche. He could say Jeff Tate from Queensrÿche, but not tour as Queensrÿche. He could tour under Operation Mindcrime, which, can you guess what they were performing at their shows?
Gee, I wonder if it was covers of Queen.
You're correct. No, they were. So even after he lost the name, he was still kind of like poking them by calling his band Operation Mindcrime and performing the Operation Mindcrime, the original and the sequel that no one really needs to hear live in its entirety. So apparently they are on somewhat speaking terms where if they're at the same festival, they can actually say hi to each other. But obviously there is a lot of just ugly bickerness where you literally had 2 versions of Queensrÿche because they couldn't agree.
And guess what's going to happen in about another 10 years?
Reunion?
Yeah, that cash grab that we talked about.
You know what, though? I actually don't know, because guess what? The version of Queensrÿche with the new singer is actually doing pretty decent, and fans are actually warming up to that version.
Yeah, but guess what? There's going to be that cash grab that needs to happen in about 10 years.
You see, I actually disagree on that one, only because fans were getting fed up with Tate.
All I'm going to say is nostalgia is a hell of a drug.
I don't know. But anyway, so that's my number 2 pick. The Queensrÿche dilemma, let's call that. The third one, also going in the more classic rock route, Creedence Clearwater Revival. They are the quintessential 60s rock band that essentially got destroyed by business disputes. They broke up in 72, but they continue to fight in court over trademark issues and whatnot. Since they broke up, there's been literally dozens and dozens of lawsuits and court fights between John Fogerty versus the rest of the band, which include Doug Clifford, Stu Cook, and his own brother, Tom Fogerty, who passed away in 1990. And then they tied into their record label, Fantasy Records owner, Saul Zanetz, or Saul, I can't pronounce his last name. Literally, like, each side claiming that they screwed them out of money or business and vice versa. It's such an ugly lawsuit. One of the lawsuits, and stop me, Matt, if you heard this, although I'm going to keep talking anyway. One of the lawsuits include the label and the rest of the band suing John Fogerty in 1984 for a solo song that he wrote sounding too much like a Creedence Clearwater revival song that he did in the 70s. So literally the claim was that the song Old Man Down the Road, which John did for a solo album in 84, was a blatant rewrite of the CCR hit Run Through the Jungle. Now, what makes that even more ridiculous is that Fogerty wrote that song. He wrote both songs, so he's getting sued for plagiarizing himself. That's
the worst
how
kind.
petty these lawsuits were. The courts were in favor of John, but then even in 95, and granted this lawsuit keeps kind of like going back and forth, John sued Clifford and Cook because in 95 they decided to form a band called Creedence Clearwater Revisited, where they would literally just sing songs from CCR. And Fogerty was like, that's misleading. It sounds too much like the name. And we all agreed that the four of us have to be in the band in order for CCR to be a thing. And at first, the courts ruled in John's favor, and then they reversed it. And so now Creedence Clearwater Revisited still tours. And because of that, they keep going back and forth in the court as to trademark issues or copyright. Like, it's ridiculous. It got to the point that John and his brother Tom never really, toward the end, according to John at least, he did, once in a while say hi or reach out to see how his brother was doing. But their relationship was shot to hell. So that by the time that Tom died by AIDS in 1990, they never reconciled. They were still bitter enemies. And it's also one of the more famous bitter moments of the Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, was that in 1993, because, in John's mind, Clifford and Cook betrayed him by going to the record, by signing with the record label and selling their souls to the label. He couldn't be on stage with them. So while he accepted the award with them, he refused to actually play with Clifford and Cook. Instead, he opted to play with Bruce Springsteen and Robbie Robertson, some Creedence songs. Now, and depending on who you ask, John says, Cook and Clifford knew I was going to do that. They knew very well that I refused to perform with them, and they knew why. To Clifford and Cook, they were like, we found out as soon as they started playing that he refused to play with us. We were disgusted. So it's just really and they're still bickering over freaking who owns what or how they can advertise the way that they're saying what songs they can perform. It's just sad. Literally, two brothers never got to reconcile because of this crap. It just shows how ugly of an industry this can be. So, Creedence Clearwater Revival, number 3.
All right.
So, before we go any deeper, I want to make one suggestion. We can fight over the 2 spots, but I'm willing to give one to Van Halen under one condition.
What's that condition?
The condition is that we also add to the split up. You named specifically the first breakup. I would like to also expand that to include essentially the shitstorm that happened in 1996.
Sure. Now, if you want to call Van Halen just one giant conglomeration of split
I would,
up.
because literally they just freaking break up, all the breaks. It's never been, we just, Roth and us agree, it's just, we're better to be apart. We're best friends still, but it's time to be apart. It never ended pretty with that band. And I specifically want to call out, and I think just to discuss what happened in 1996, because it literally is fascinating how within 1 year such crap could happen. I mean, first they had an ugly breakup with Sammy Hagar the first time after, as we discussed in a past episode of Am I Missing Something, available on all platforms, that after almost a decade of just hit albums and hit tours, Eddie and Sammy had a nasty fallout over, ironically, soundtracks end up really causing rifts among bands, don't they?
You know what? I think they do, because
it's crazy.
The band has to kind of concede to certain things, which some people will agree, it's not that big of a deal, while others, it goes against my integrity as an artist and blah, blah, blah.
So they had an ugly split of Sammy Hagar. And it also
I actually
around
like
that
those songs that they did for that. I'm assuming we're talking Twister.
Yeah. And around that time, and what also caused the rift was they were entertaining, or they were in the midst of doing a series of compilation albums that involved them talking to Roth.
The best of both worlds.
That didn't really sit so great with Hagar, them talking to their ex. And so basically Hagar is gone. And as they're discussing what songs to include, they're talking with Roth and the idea of, hey, how about we record some new songs together? Okay, cool. Hey, how about the 4 original members introduce an award at the VMAs that year? All right, that sounds cool. Literally laying down the groundwork for a reunion in everyone's minds. Well, 2 things really happened that ended up kiboshing that. One, the Van Halen brothers and Roth spent more than 15 minutes in a room and realized, oh, we hate each other. The Van Halen brothers was like, oh, Roth is such an asshole on stage, disrespecting Beck, who won the award that they were handing out. And then Roth's like, oh, they were such a jerk. But what made that even more awkward is that if you think about it, while the Van Halen brothers were like, Roth made it impossible to even entertain the idea of getting back together, they were never really interested. Because as that was happening, they were already auditioning new singers. Like, even before they went to the VMAs, there was even stories, depending on who you ask, it might have even been Gary Sharon who ended up joining the band after that whole debacle happened. Yeah. And they were saying how, I found out that Roth was supposedly back in the band while I was recording my parts, or when I was working on some stuff with the Van Halen brothers. I found out on TV that they were doing that at the same time. So the brothers were already planning life without Roth. Their intention was never, and even Roth later called them out. I was like, yeah, I apologize to everyone, but I was as shocked as you were that I was part of a publicity stunt.
I want to just forget that whole era
of just 90s Van Halen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, not up until the Twister stuff. After that, let's just forget that.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on your take of the last Van Halen album, maybe some people want to forget that too.
Yeah. But anyway, so I think as long as we expand it to be, because then you can even go into when Hagar got back together in 2004 and Sammy leaving. And then that leading to also Michael Anthony getting the boot. I mean, you can even argue that tour is doomed from the start when, initially the brothers were like, no, we don't want Michael Anthony on this tour. And Sammy had to, fight for him.
Yeah, well, they're best of buds.
Yeah, but Mike was there originally. That's just crazy. So I think Van Halen, if we can expand it to just be Van Halen.
How about just Van Halen, period?
Period.
Yeah, just Van Halen, period. So
that's in the final 3.
That's fine. Van Halen, period.
So we got Oasis, Guns N' Roses.
And Van Halen.
The Black Crowes.
Yep.
And Creedence Clearwater Revival. And Queensrÿche.
Yes, 5.
5.
Well, we got to fight over every other spot but Van Halen.
All right, so let me pose this question. So I got Queensrÿche, Black Crowes, and Creedence left.
Yep.
You got Guns N' Roses, Oasis left.
Yep.
Out of those 2, which one do you really want to fight for?
I would honestly try to fight for Oasis more than Guns N' Roses because it seems, unless we're in the midst of what could be another potential huge breakup and fallout, but I don't think it's going to happen, you still have those brothers essentially at each other's throats every single time that they think that they want to get back together. Mm-hmm. Because they did that album back in the early 2000s. I forget what the hell it was called, but they came back together underneath the name Oasis. And then, that didn't end so well. So I'm going to say Oasis.
So you're going to fight for Oasis. I'm not saying that Oasis is in the final 3
no,
just
no,
yet.
I'm going to fight for it.
So I'm going to push aside Black Crowes. Partially because that also seemed like that kind of resolved itself, it looks like, to the most part.
Yeah, at least
I would also argue that if you look, Creedence Clearwater Revival.
That's just nasty.
It's so nasty. And to me, that also involves brothers. There's an excerpt from Fogerty's biography where he talks about him trying to reconcile with his brother, and it just turned into a, no, you did. No, you did. No, you did. And they never reconciled in time. And that also just played out in public so dramatically as well, the Hall of Fame performance. So I would push for Creedence Clearwater to be in the top 3.
That's fine.
So it really comes down to Queensrÿche or Oasis. And this is where I'm torn.
I think
Because there was so much. You literally had 2 versions
right, but
of a band.
I'm gonna just for the sheer fact that I think it's bigger because Oasis was, it's public, but it's Queensrÿche public. They weren't really as popular, and people are going to hate me for that.
Well,
Queensrÿche wasn't as popular as Oasis when the Oasis
This
thing
isn't
happened.
a question about like popularity
of
though.
the breakup. I'm saying,
But at the same time, the topic is not the most popular breakups. It's the ugliest splits.
nobody almost died in a Queensrÿche.
Yes,
breakup.
they did. On stage, they almost fought each other.
Yeah, but okay, he was. I forget which Gallagher it was almost thrown over the balcony.
Tate almost punched out Scott, and if there was no one
Nobody's-
breaking. Hold on. If there was no one there to keep those 2 aging rockers apart, I know I'm not helping myself here, but if those aging rockers apart, they could have killed each other. The amount of physical altercations, I would argue, is equal here.
But I would also argue that it's uglier if you're trying to throw somebody over a balcony because that's like intent to kill.
When did that actually happen, though? Because
That was at what the hell awards show is that?
Because keep in mind, Oasis had always fought each other, even when they were together. They didn't officially break up until 2009.
I forget which award show it was, but one of them tried to throw the other one over the balcony.
But that could have happened on a Sunday in the middle of What's Your Story Morning Glory tour. Like, that's my point. Like, they always fought, even when they were together.
Yeah.
Even on a good day, they were throwing fists at each other.
Right.
I think management was more concerned when they weren't fighting.
Way to PR that up.
Neither of them have claimed that, I am Oasis, I have the right to tour under the name. Like, Queensrÿche went to court numerous times. Almost 2 years, maybe even more. There were 2 versions of Queensrÿche. Like, damage was done.
You could argue what does it mean that damage was done?
Fans were torn and had to choose, or was like, you know what? Screw it. I'd rather see neither. Like, the legacy, the amount of bickering that happened to that band damaged the reputation of that band's name for whatever it's worth. You could argue that it didn't really hold much stock toward the end anyway. At least with Oasis, they broke up and let Oasis kind of be its own thing still.
Well, there actually was some legal battles. If you want to really get that deep into it, there was 3 cases where they're
In Oasis?
Yeah, about plagiarism of each other.
Of each other.
Yeah.
So the brothers sued each other.
Yes. But I mean, that's where it's going to be. It's between those 2. Everybody else is kind of just sitting back like, all right, they're them.
I mean, I will, in Oasis' defense, I will also say that the fact that they are brothers definitely makes it sadder.
Right. I mean, you think that in this world, the person who you could count on is your brother.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm still siding on Oasis, even just for that fact, because I mean, people are people. You know, if you're an asshole to somebody, and they're just doing their own thing, they could just be like, all right, I'm out, and that's it, and that's the last time you have to speak to them. This is literally a part of your family. I don't know if their parents were alive or whatever the deal is with them as kids. Can you imagine trying to have like Christmas or any of the holidays, and it's like, okay, you're there and your brother won't come because you're there, or if there's like a restraining order at some point in time, because I wouldn't be surprised if there was.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm still gonna push for Oasis.
So I was literally just about to say I can be convinced of Oasis, but then so you would argue that the split within Oasis was uglier than Black Crowes, because the mirror aspect of brothers fighting.
But it sounds like with the Black Crowes, the split happened, but then the split was kind of iced over by saying it's because of business practices. Oasis broke up because they hated each other and they weren't trying to be friendly about it.
But don't you think that's almost sadder?
Exactly. That's what makes it
but
worse.
sadder than the Black Crowes scenario.
No, because
and mind you, it wasn't even that, oh, you know what? No, business sucks. I can't be in a band of you. Oh, but you want to come over next weekend for some barbecue? they didn't speak for years because of that. It was because of the money. It wasn't even because they hated each other. It was, and now maybe they actually did, and they just used money as an excuse. But it was actually the money and the way that business was handled that made them go, I don't even want to be in the same room with you. I don't even want to talk to you on the phone anymore. Like, you can make the argument, all right, so the Liam brothers, or Liam and Noel, they just literally hated each other. It was never even about money, that they were doomed from the start. Everyone even told them it was a bad idea for them to be in the band together because they always were fighting, even as kids.
And that's what makes it sadder. I mean,
but like,
I would, if it were me, I'd rather not talk to you than put myself through that torment, because that's what I need to do to make money. You know, I need to get on the stage and I need to perform, but this asshole over here is in this band and all he does is push my buttons. So to me, it's even worse if you're forced to go out there.
But then, so you're saying that's even worse than two brothers who were the closest of brothers, who literally their whole lives, they always had each other's back, but then they had fame, and because of that fame, it made them no longer close. So now they're no longer talking to each other because one wanted more money than the other. You don't think that's sadder? I think that's even sadder.
They're both sad.
Because at least with Oasis, it's like, all right, we always hated each other's guts. Like you kind of get the feeling that like Liam's life is not really impacted by the fact that he doesn't talk to Noel anymore. Granted, maybe that's the same case with the Robinson brothers too. And maybe they're just doing a better job at hiding the fact that they really can't stand each other's guts.
Correct. So we'll never really know what happened.
I just have a harder time, like all the arguments that you're saying for why Oasis should be in the three, I would almost argue is a defense for the Black Crowes being the three.
So then it sounds like we have a tie between the third spot. Because we're never going to be able to pull this apart.
Which is funny because I felt like I was actually like pushing aside the Black Crowes, but the more I even talk about it out loud, because you're right, the brotherly bond makes it kind of worse.
Right.
Like Queensrÿche, there was no blood really in
No,
there.
they're guys who played
ego.
music together and they fell apart.
Just pure ego there.
Right, exactly.
And that's kind of what makes, Creedence was already a disaster with the amount of like legal battles that happened within the band. But then you add in the brother element, and that makes it even sadder.
Yeah.
Although I would even argue that even without that, I would still push for Creedence. Just because in a day and age when there was no internet to learn that, John Fogerty got sued for sounding like himself. That's insane.
Right. So then our final list would then be Van Halen.
Yes.
The whole thing. CCR. And a tie between Oasis and the Black Crowes.
I can live with that.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Live with that. I also think it's kind of fitting that that's the two that are tied together.
Yeah.
That feels right.
There's no other way to put it. I mean,
that feels right.
If you're going to fight about brothers and all of it's just a shit show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is.
But to recap, we've agreed that the final three of the ugliest splits in music, Van Halen, Pick Your Own Adventure, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and a tie between the Black Crowes and Oasis.
Destructive brotherly love.
Yeah, so sad. After you kind of stopped crying from how sad all of that was, do you agree with our list? Could you think of an even uglier breakup or split in music that makes everything that we just talked about seem like a cakewalk? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any platform you can imagine, at Epic Footnote. We want to hear from you, and we also really want you to keep listening to us as us two music nerds just keep blabbering on and on about our favorite things in music. So thanks so much for listening, and we hope you tune in for another episode.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.